announced, my best friend Alex and I had eagerly anticipated this camping trip. We both craved an escape from the city, and the allure of a remote mountain lake nestled within a vast forest promised the perfect respite. Neither of us had ventured into this particular wilderness before, and the prospect of exploring uncharted territory excited us. As we arrived, the sheer beauty of the landscape stole our breath. Majestic mountains with snow-capped peaks pierced the horizon, providing an awe-inspiring backdrop to the lush forest surrounding the lake. Sunlight filtered through the dense canopy, casting with a real green glow upon the forest floor, where wild flowers and ferns sprouted between the gnarled roots of ancient trees. The air hummed with the melodies of birdsong and the rustling of leaves. A narrow, winding path led us to the lake, its surface shimmering like a mirror under the sun, reflecting the azure sky and fluffy white clouds. The water, crystal clear, revealed smooth, rounded stones lining the lake bed. Nestled within a valley, the lake felt embraced by the protective arms of the mountains rising on either side. After soaking in the scenery, we searched for the perfect campsite, close enough to the lake for easy access to water and fishing, yet far enough from the shoreline to avoid any nocturnal encounters with curious wildlife. Eventually, we discovered a secluded clearing tucked away amongst the trees. The ground, soft and blanketed with fallen leaves, provided an ideal spot to pitch our tent. Towering trees offered ample shade, shielding us from the sun's harsh rays. Nearby, a babbling brook wove through the landscape, its crystal, clear water dancing over smooth rocks, creating a soothing soundtrack to our serene surroundings. We meticulously pitched our tent, securing the lines to withstand the unexpected gusts of wind. Once our shelter was established, we constructed a fire pit a safe distance away, using rocks gathered from the lake's edge to contain the flames. We carefully collected firewood and kindling, mindful not to disrupt the delicate ecosystem. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the mountains with a golden hue and casting a warm, inviting light upon the lake, we settled near the crackling fire, ready to embrace our first night in this remote paradise. The tranquility of the landscape soothed our weary souls, and we eagerly anticipated exploring and familiarizing ourselves with this uncharted territory. The first day of our adventure began with the sun gently rousing us from our slumber. We emerged from our tent, greeted by the cool morning air and the invigorating scent of pine needles. Excited for the day ahead, we prepared a hearty breakfast of scrambled eggs and bacon cooked over the campfire, accompanied by strong hot coffee. After breakfast, we gathered our fishing gear and headed towards the lake. The water was so clear that we could observe fish darting beneath the surface. We eagerly cast our lines and patiently awaited a bite, enjoying the peaceful atmosphere, sharing stories, and laughing. The hours flew by, and by the time we decided to return to camp, we had caught several impressive fish for our dinner. Back at our campsite, we prepared our catch, marinating the fish with a blend of spices we had brought along. As evening approached, we rekindled the campfire, and the enticing aroma of grilling fish mingled with the scent of burning wood. We feasted on our catch, reveling in our self-sufficiency and the delicious flavors of our wilderness meal. After dinner, we sat by the fire, mesmerized by the countless stars that adorned the night sky. We talked and laughed, enveloped by the warmth of the fire and the camaraderie, feeling completely at ease in our secluded haven. The second day dawned, and we eagerly planned a hike through the forest. After a quick breakfast of granola bars and fruit, we packed our backpacks with essential water, snacks, and a first aid kit. We ventured onto a well-trodden path that led us deeper into the woods, accompanied by the symphony of birdsong and rustling leaves. As we hiked, we marveled at the diverse plant life and the vibrant shades of green that surrounded us. We encountered a small, meandering stream, its water crystal clear and gently bubbling over smooth rocks. We followed the stream for a while, pausing to rest and savor the soothing sounds of the flowing water. Further along, we discovered a grove of ancient trees, their massive trunks adorned with thick, gnarled bark. The air felt heavy with history as we stood in the quiet clearing, imagining the countless years these majestic trees had witnessed. By late afternoon, we returned to our campsite, tired but invigorated by our day of exploration. We opted for a simple dinner of canned chili heated over the fire, followed by gooey s'mores for dessert. As night fell, we listened to the sounds of the forest, feeling grateful for the experiences we had shared during our first 2 days in this remote and beautiful place. On the third day, we awoke to the cheerful chirping of birds and a gentle breeze rustling through the leaves. After a breakfast of pancakes cooked over the campfire, we decided to explore a different part of the forest, hoping to uncover more of the natural wonders this remote area held. We packed our backpacks with essentials and set off along a lesser-known trail, less defined than the ones we had previously followed. The forest grew denser as we ventured deeper, the sunlight filtering through the canopy in narrow beams, casting a mosaic of light and shadow upon the forest floor. The air was thick with the scent of moss and damp earth, and occasional flashes of color caught our eye as butterflies and birds flitted through the undergrowth. As we hiked, we chatted and marveled at the scenery until we stumbled upon a small, mysterious clearing. Ringed with wild flowers, the clearing seemed to possess an almost magnetic allure. The grass appeared greener and more vibrant than in the surrounding forest. Alex, in particular, was drawn to it, curiosity sparkling in his eyes. "Hey, I'm going to check that out. I'll be right back," Alex announced, stepping off the trail and heading towards the clearing. I watched him go, a sense of unease creeping over me, though I couldn't explain why. I decided to wait near the trail, assuming he wouldn't be gone long. I sat on a fallen log, absorbing the sights and sounds of the forest while I waited for Alex to return. Minutes turned into hours, and worry gnawed at me. I called out Alex's name, my voice echoing through the trees, but there was no response. Unable to wait any longer, I hesitantly ventured into the clearing, my heart pounding. The clearing seemed even more peculiar up close, but there was no sign of Alex. I spent hours combing the surrounding woods, calling his name, searching for any clue. As the sun began to set, I realized I had no choice but to return to camp, hoping against hope that Alex had somehow found his way back. With a heavy heart, I retraced my steps, following the trail back to our campsite. As I approached, I spotted a familiar figure sitting by the fire, staring into the flames. Relief washed over me, and I hurried to his side. "Where have you been?" I asked, my voice a mix of relief and frustration. "I've been searching for you for hours. I just got a little lost," Alex replied, his eyes avoiding mine. "I'm sorry." Though relieved to have found my friend, I couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that had taken root since his disappearance. As the days passed, I began to notice subtle changes in Alex that made me question if the person who returned from the clearing was truly my friend. Initially, these changes were easy to dismiss as fatigue or the stress of getting lost. The first oddity was Alex's sudden disinterest in our usual conversations. Before, we could talk for hours about anything and everything, but now he seemed distant and disengaged. His responses were brief, and he would often stare off into the distance, lost in thought. Next, I observed an unusual fascination with the wildlife. He would spend hours watching birds and squirrels, his gaze following their every move with an intensity I had never witnessed before. It was as if he was studying them, trying to decipher their behavior. His appetite had also changed dramatically. Alex, once an adventurous eater, now seemed to have an aversion to the food we had brought. He would pick at his meals, eating just enough to sustain himself, but never with genuine enjoyment. Perhaps the most unsettling change was his newfound ability to navigate the forest with uncanny ease. Alex, who had always been directionally challenged, now seemed to possess an innate understanding of the terrain. He would venture off into the woods alone, always returning to camp without difficulty. This was especially unnerving considering how easily he had gotten lost just days earlier. Finally, I noticed his erratic sleeping habits. Some nights he would lie awake in the tent, staring at the ceiling as if waiting for something. Other nights, he would slip out of the tent and disappear into the woods, only to return just before dawn. All of these strange behaviors fueled my unease. I couldn't escape the feeling that something had happened to Alex in that mysterious clearing, and that the person who returned was not the same person who had entered. As our camping trip neared its end and we prepared to return to civilization, I dreaded what might happen once we left this remote and enigmatic place. As the five friends continued their road trip, they reveled in the freedom of the open road. Ella, the history buff with a penchant for adventure, eagerly shared stories about forgotten towns and settlements scattered across the country. Max, the group's free, spirited artist, often sketched the picturesque landscapes they encountered. Sarah, the practical and resourceful one, ensured they stayed on track with their itinerary. Jake, the inquisitive engineer, and Chris, the charismatic musician, provided endless entertainment through their lively debates about technology and music trends. Each friend brought a unique dynamic to the journey, and their camaraderie grew stronger with every passing mile. One day, while traversing a desolate stretch of highway, they noticed their gas gauge nearing empty. Concerned, they searched for the nearest gas station. As the sun dipped towards the horizon, casting an orange glow across the sky, they spotted a faded sign pointing towards a town called Hollow Grove. It seemed like the perfect opportunity to refuel and find a place to rest for the night. The road to Hollow Grove was narrow and winding, enveloped by dense, ancient trees that seemed to close in as they ventured deeper. An unnerving atmosphere settled over them, and they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being drawn into something otherworldly. As the last rays of sunlight faded, a thick fog rolled in, reducing visibility to mere feet. Despite their unease, they pressed on, guided only by the dim glow of their headlights. A growing sense of disorientation washed over them as the road seemed to stretch endlessly, with no sign of the town. Their nerves frayed, and the air in the car grew heavy with tension. Finally, they spotted the decrepit welcome sign for Hollow Grove, nearly obscured by the encroaching forest. As they entered the town, a cold shiver ran down their spines. It appeared entirely deserted, its once proud buildings reduced to crumbling shells. The streets were empty and lifeless, the only sound a distant, mournful howl of the wind. The forest seemed to press in on them, creating an oppressive atmosphere. The once vibrant colors of the foliage appeared muted, as if life itself had been drained from the landscape. Gnarled branches cast eerie, twisted shadows that danced in the fading light. The first signs of abandonment were dilapidated houses on the outskirts. These once charming homes now stood desolate, with broken windows, peeling paint, and overgrown yards. Their unease grew, but they pressed on, driven by their need for fuel and shelter. Upon reaching the town center, they found the main street lined with crumbling, abandoned buildings. Boarded up storefronts, rusted lampposts, and the weathered sign of the town's former diner hinted at a once thriving community. A thick layer of dust and grime covered every surface, and the air was heavy with the scent of decay. Despite the eerie silence, they couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The wind whispered through the trees, rustling the leaves, creating an unsettling soundtrack to their exploration. They continued through the deserted town, passing the lifeless remains of Hollow Grove's church, schoolhouse, and post office. Nature had begun to reclaim the town, with ivy snaking up walls and tall grass encroaching upon the cracked pavement. At the edge of town, they discovered an old motel, its crumbling sign barely visible through the overgrown foliage. The building itself appeared relatively intact, though years of neglect had left it in a state of disrepair. The once vibrant paint had faded to a dull gray, and the windows were dark and empty. As they approached the abandoned motel, they hesitated, exchanging uneasy glances. The building seemed to exude a cold, unwelcoming aura, but they knew they had little choice but to seek shelter for the night. Gathering their courage, they stepped out of the car and slowly made their way towards the motel's entrance. The glass door of the lobby had long since shattered, leaving a gaping hole. Ella, armed with a flashlight, cautiously led the group inside. The lobby was coated in a thick layer of dust, and the musty smell of mildew hung in the air. Cobwebs stretched across the corners, and remnants of wallpaper clung to the walls. Max noticed a rusty key rack behind the reception desk. Remarkably, several keys still hung in their designated spots. Sarah suggested they each take a key, hoping the rooms would offer some semblance of comfort in this eerie place. As they ventured down the dimly lit hallway, the floorboards creaked and groaned beneath their weight. Jake noticed that each door bore the scars of time, with chipped paint and warped frames. Chris quietly strummed his guitar, attempting to lighten the mood, but the notes seemed to be swallowed by the oppressive silence. Upon reaching their designated rooms, they hesitantly unlocked the doors and stepped inside. The rooms were surprisingly intact, though the passage of time had left its mark. The carpets were matted and faded, and the paint on the walls peeled. The furniture was coated in dust and cobwebs, but the beds still held their shape. As they unpacked, Sarah discovered an old newspaper hidden beneath the tattered curtains. The headline read, "Entire town of Hollow Grove vanishes overnight." The friends exchanged nervous glances, sensing they had stumbled upon a chilling mystery connected to the ghostly figures they had seen roaming the town. Throughout the night, they took turns keeping watch, unable to shake the feeling that something was watching them from the shadows. Ella, on the first watch, heard faint whispers that grew more distinct as the night wore on. When her shift ended, she woke Max, who, despite his skepticism, also heard the ghostly voices. Sarah, during her watch, could make out the voices of the town's former residents, their words filled with sorrow and regret. She even saw spectral figures moving outside the windows, their faces etched with despair. Jake and Chris during their turns, also experienced the whispers and apparitions. By dawn, the friends gathered in the lobby, their sleepless night evident on their faces. They knew they had to uncover the truth about Hollow Grove before they, too, became trapped in its supernatural grasp. Ella suggested they search the town library for any records that might shed light on the town's past. Upon entering the library, they found it in a state of disarray. Max and Chris searched the shelves for local history books, while Jake and Sarah sifted through piles of newspapers. Ella discovered a hidden room filled with old maps, town records, and handwritten journals. Together, they pieced together the tragic history of Hollow Grove. They found accounts of a meteor crashed decades ago and the strange energy it emitted, warping time and space. The journals spoke of townspeople vanishing without a trace. They learned of an ancient ritual believed to have the power to break the supernatural loop that held the town captive. With time running out, they decided to split up to gather the necessary items for the ritual. Ella and Max scoured the library for books on the occult, searching for the incantations. Sarah and Chris ventured into the forest to collect herbs and plants, while Jake constructed a makeshift altar at the meteor crash site. As the sun began to set, they regrouped at the crash site, armed with the knowledge and tools they needed. They began the ritual, and the ghostly figures gathered around them, their faces filled with a mix of hope and fear. Ella recited the incantation, her voice growing stronger with each word. Max arranged the herbs and plants in a protective pattern, and the fragrant smoke filled the air. Jake's makeshift altar glowed with an ethereal light. Sarah and Chris played a haunting melody, connecting the living and the dead. The energy intensified, the air shimmering and vibrating. As the ritual reached its climax, a brilliant flash of light erupted from the center of the circle. The meteor resonated with their actions, its energy surging. The ghostly figures were drawn towards the light, their forms shimmering. One by one, they stepped into the glow, their sorrowful expressions replaced with relief and gratitude. They disappeared into the light, their souls finally free. The light faded, leaving the friends standing in the now quiet clearing. They could feel a shift in the atmosphere, as if a heavy burden had been lifted. Exhausted but triumphant, they knew they had succeeded in breaking the curse. They left Hollow Grove the following day, carrying a sense of pride and accomplishment. The experience had bonded them in ways they could never have imagined, and they would carry the memory of Hollow Grove with them forever.